Hello, and welcome to Read the Care Tag, a fashion podcast. If you love anything fashion related and you never grew out of playing dress up, well then this podcast is for you. With a sprinkle of history, a dabble of pop culture, a healthy dollop of fashion obsession, and a pinch of philosophical questioning, I hope you enjoy the show. This is episode 2, Denim, where we dive into the rich history of one of the most iconic fabrics of all time. So put on your favorite pair of jeans, sit back, relax, and let's start our journey through the wild indigo seas of denim. I'm your host, Maya, and I have to admit I've been waiting for this episode. I really love jeans. And when I first researched this almost a year ago, so much of what I learned actually blew my mind. We all wear jeans, but when do we ever ask the question of where do they come from? Even though for some people it might be a bit of a love-hate relationship, that doesn't change the fact that jeans are an integral part of practically every person's wardrobe. From luxury to fast fashion, you would be seriously hard-pressed to find a single brand that doesn't have a denim line. It really has become ingrained in the fashion ethos of the 20th and 21st century in a way that no other product ever has been. Before we get into that side of things, let's first talk about what denim is as a fabric. It belongs to the woven category of fabrics, meaning that it's essentially made up of many threads cross-hatched over each other in a grid pattern. This is what gives fabric grain. If you've ever watched someone rip fabric in a super satisfying way where it comes out in a perfectly straight line, that's definitely a woven fabric. Some great examples of woven fabric are things like bed sheets, the material that a dress shirt would be made of, slacks, things like that generally don't stretch, and so woven fabrics, unless there's elastic in the fiber of the thread, usually are not stretchy. So now that we've clarified what woven fabric is, what makes denim special? Well, the first thing is that denim usually is not made of all one color threads. So usually one direction of the thread is going to be colored and one direction of the thread is going to be undyed, usually white. This is what gives denim that trademark washed look of white and blue mixed together. I should also probably clarify what I mean when I say direction of the thread. As we said, woven materials are made up of that grid of threads. So that means that you have threads going up and down, which are called the warp thread, and threads going side to side, which is called the weft thread. And in all woven materials, you have these threads going over and under each other, creating that grid of woven material. So now the second thing that makes denim unique is that in this method of weaving, unlike most woven fabrics where the threads go over one, under one, over one, under one, in denim, the weft or horizontal thread is always passed over one vertical or warp thread and then under two. This creates that distinctive denim pattern that has that diagonal color variation and that unique texture of ribbing that you can feel with your hands. So now that we know what denim is and what makes it so special, where does it come from? Well, originally, denim was called sergé de Nimes. Serge meaning twill fabric, and Nimes being a city in France that popularized material. So there you get sergé de Nimes, denim. Now disclaimer, it wasn't invented there. Actually, a predecessor to denim called dungaree fabric existed in India for centuries prior to this. However, Nimes is where the fabric became popularized in the West. Ironically, it was created by accident, as weavers of the time tried to reverse engineer Jean, a 16th century Genoan corduroy. Jean, jeans. Now that's an etymological story for another day. But long story short, Joseph André in Nimes is credited with its creation, and it continues to remain somewhat unknown until its explosion in popularity in 19th century United States. So the exact line between 1500s France and denim coming to 19th century America isn't quite clear. Historians theorize that many weavers were French Protestants, and if you know anything about the religious climate in those years, you can see why the constant Catholic versus Protestant conflicts in a mainly Catholic France might make those people want to get the hell out of there. and the assumption is that wherever they settled, they continued their trade. While French denim weavers brought denim to America, the creation of modern jeans themselves was a product of the power duo Jacob Davis and Levi Strauss. Now, we all know Levi Strauss, but who the hell was Jacob Davis? So Jacob emigrated from Europe to Nevada, and as you can imagine, durable materials would be in high demand in that area. So he opened a tailor shop and basically began making everything and anything. Meanwhile, Levi was a bit of a nepo baby whose family owned a business dealing in dry goods, clothing, and textiles. During the California Gold Rush, he came to San Francisco to expand his family's business. And one of their imports was, you guessed it, denim, straight from France. So when he opened a store, as a tailor, Jake started shopping there, and their romance blossomed. I'm joking, of course, but essentially, Jacob was in need of material for durable pants to fill his orders. And coming across Levi's denim, he found just the thing. He also had that eureka moment that created the blueprint for jeans that have hardly changed over the past 150 years. You know those little metal things at the corners of the pockets? Those things are called rivets. And basically, Jacob came up with the brilliant idea to put those little metal rivets at the pocket corners and other points of tension that make this combination with a very strong fabric incredibly durable and long-lasting. They were so good that these pants were quite literally flying off the shelves. At this point, Jacob's little tailor shop simply couldn't handle the load, and so he partnered with Levi and moved his production into Levi's facilities, at which point the iconic Levi jeans were born. They even began making a model for the military, which had a loose fit and it was based off of coveralls or overalls with just the bib removed. They were even called waist overalls. And this model was assigned that most iconic ID number 501. Over the past century and a half, this very first model, the 501s, have become the best-selling clothing item in human history. That original indigo blue has lasted over 150 years. Sure, today jeans come in all different washes, colors, dye methods, but when it comes down to it, if you're imagining jeans in your head, are you seeing anything other than blue? Early on, jeans solidified their place as part of public consciousness in terms of workwear, but with time, that perspective began to shift. Levi's and Davis patented their rivet model in 1873 and basically dominated the market until the end of the 1800s. But as the 20th century began, Wrangler and Lee began to edge their way in, and over the course of the 20s to 30s, modern jeans began to spread from the West to the East United States. Historians believe that this was led by the dude ranch craze, a craze which arose from the nostalgia for the rugged Wild West days of the 1800s. And dude ranches, occupied by cattle and horse ranchers, capitalized on providing cowboy experiences for city folk in search of an adventure. Unsurprisingly, denim, their daily uniform, became a cowboy symbol. Even our favorite publication has lots to say about it, with a Vogue writer in 1928 visiting a Wyoming ranch and sharing a photo of herself scandalously attired in jeans. Then, in Vogue's 1935 June issue, an article called Dude Dressing tells us about the art of denim distressing. My favorite line in the article goes like this. What she does is hurry down to the ranch store and ask for a pair of blue jeans, which she secretly floats the ensuing night in a bathtub of water. The oftener a pair of jeans is laundered, the higher its value, especially if it shrinks to the high water mark. Another innovation, a most recent one if I may judge, also goes on in the dead of night and undoubtedly behind locked doors. An intentional rip here and there in the back of the jeans. The romanticization of the diminishing Wild West, along with denim-clad movie cowboys, and the fact that you could only buy Levi's west of the Mississippi River made jeans the hottest item on the market. Not long after, World War II began, and denim was viewed as an essential commodity, so jeans were only sold to people engaged in some sort of service. When American soldiers in Europe wore their jeans off-duty, the mythical American was born. fueling the association of jeans with Americana to the Europeans around them. Post-World War II North America was an interesting beast, and I'll definitely do an episode on 1950s fashion in the future. But in essence, it was a period in which people were coming out of hard times. The deep nostalgia for a better time before the war made styles revert to longer, poofier, and more traditional silhouettes. Denim represented the complete opposite. When Marlon Brando wore the 501s in the movie The Wild One, denim began to get associated with crime, and high schools even banned them as they began to represent, quote, bikers and beatniks. But as we all know, what happens when you tell kids they can't have something? They only want it more. So in the 60s, the denim counterculture began to be absorbed into mainstream fashion, and this happened concurrently with the rise of mass consumerism. As the baby boomers were gaining more buying power, jeans were the first thing they were in line to buy. Despite this sounding like a negative, it actually reflects the generation's views on civil rights, women's liberation, and the shirking of society's formal constraints. But by the 1970s, jeans were mainstream. No longer a reflection of niche, hippie, and rebellious movements, jeans were worn by everyone, from the States to Europe. All ages were embracing the new age of casual fashion. Denim was becoming so mainstream that car companies, like American Motors, started upholstering their car interiors with denim-like fabric. The 1973 AMC Gremlin even had a full-on Levi's collab. I have to say, I kind of love that that model was called a Gremlin. Something about that just feels right. There was also a jeans Beetle from 1973 to 75, and even Jeep offered denim interiors from 1975 to 77. So we said that jeans were all over the world at this point, but what was that really like? Well, as you may know, the Cold War was brewing, and Russia was in full Soviet swing. With mass consumerism rising in America, stamped-out clothing items like jeans were flooding the market. On the surface, jeans would be an ideal proletariat item of clothing for the Soviet Union to appropriate. Both strong and durable, just pick a drab wash, and they'd be perfect. But this didn't happen. In fact, jeans were seen as the symbol of Americana. Everyone from superstars to laborers wore them. Ripping and distressing them let you individualize them, and they represented the mystery and individual success associated with the American dream. Contraband Levi's would be smuggled in through Russia's black market, and there was even a class of jean crimes for which you could be severely punished. Now, I have a pretty unique perspective on this period, because my parents are immigrants from the Soviet Union, and they grew up there from the 70s to the 90s when they left. I have heard countless stories about how in-demand and desired jeans were, with secret parties and lucky people whose parents worked in import and export businesses, or in the government, which allowed them to sneak by with a pair or two. I also grew up watching Russian movies in which I saw denim smuggling rings, secret bathtub washings, setups as integral plot points of gang movies. Alright, so back to the denim playground of America. In the 70s and 80s, jeans firmly solidified their place in high fashion, with American designers claiming them for their own. Calvin Klein reworked the fit to be impossibly tight to emphasize what was underneath. Supposedly, you would have to lie on your back and pull the zipper up with pliers in order to get those babies on. And as different fits flooded the market, designers turned their attention to the details, with bleach, stone, and acid washes, distressing, embroidery, and so much more. At first, American brands like Calvin Klein, Oscar de la Renta, and Geoffrey Beene, I don't know if I said that one right, and Ralph Lauren dominated the market. But then, Diesel entered from stage left and became the first brand to Italianize denim and create a new tier of unique designer jeans. They brought in details like whiskering, which are now a signature of jeans. Eventually, brands began to develop stretch denim, which allowed for more comfortable, unique fits. And now, we exist in a unique landscape. Stretch denim has solidified its place with comfort and ease of wear. However, the speed and variety with which trends ebb and flow has made consumers often settle themselves into aesthetics rooted in nostalgia for better times. I'd like to take a moment also to look at the denim development outside of North America. In the 70s and 80s, when America was figuring out the best way to make the most and cheapest jeans around, The Japanese did the opposite. If you've ever heard of selvage or heritage denim, this is what the fashion snobs are talking about. Essentially, it's achieved by using shuttle looms and less uniform yarn to create a more natural and organic fiber with a woven finish on the edge. This finish on the edge is called the selvage. Then, with techniques like waxing, resin coating, washing, weaving in metallic threads, and so many different methods were employed by designers to create incredible and artistic garments beyond their base purpose. Unfortunately, though, this does inflate the cost, and as most of us can't afford these jeans as a casual purchase, we turn to the cheaper market, and therein lies the very sad reality of globalization in the fashion economy. There are very few home-based denim productions remaining in America, and the majority are at a negligible scale economy-wise. Most of the labor for cheap denim comes from across the pond in China, India, and down south in Latin and South America. The availability of cheaper labor, lower production costs, and looser regulations have made a disastrous cocktail that makes it hard to wear these items without a sense of guilt. Not to mention the amount of environmental impact cotton farming, artificial dyes, and the denim wash process have on the environment. Although I will eventually do an episode doing a deep dive on these topics, at the moment it's honestly hard for me to think about because it genuinely gives me a bit of an existential crisis about pursuing a career in this industry every single time. The only thing we can really do is try to slow down our consumption and purchase secondhand as well as research companies we purchase from. But that's no easy task, and it doesn't really tackle the issues of the system when you're just forced to follow the rules of that system in order to continue existing. Now, don't mind me going on a bit of a philosophical tangent, but it truly is something that I think relates to fashion and our lives in general, so bear with me. Camus and Sartre talk about distraction, and to some, art, fashion, pleasure, and all these things are sort of distractions that serve to place a sheer veil to separate us from reality. Why? Well, because reality is not something you can ever see or perceive as a whole, and the glimpses you do see are overwhelming. Seeing people, animals, the earth, suffering, and knowing that dwelling upon that without action will only bring you suffering, but simultaneously being unable to take that action. Let me illustrate that in an example. If you were living your life every day normally, but would constantly see monsters in the corner of your eye, but every time you look, there's nothing there. They exist constantly in your periphery, and it would make it extremely stressful and difficult unless you found a way to block that out or distract yourself. Anytime I try to think about the reality of the horrors that exist in our world, I just feel it slip through my metaphysical fingers. We're just animals, but we run around our lives following rules, going to work, paying our bills, buying things, putting on little shows for each other, and it's genuinely so stress-inducing to think about everything that exists outside of those schedules that we tend to close our eyes to that. And I don't necessarily want to transfer my personal existential crisis to you, but I just want to highlight that art, fashion, the art of dressing ourselves, entertainment, these are all distractions we use to cope with the inconceivable reality of the world around us. And as much as this sounds depressing, it's really not. At least to me, it's not. As Sartre says, the key to life is living in good faith. And to live in that way, you must claim responsibility with your actions and be content with the choices you make. Although this is a simplification, what it conveys to me is that if you choose art or entertainment as a distraction, you must accept your responsibility for those choices and be content with the consequences. As someone who had a very science-focused education and was constantly pushed towards medical sciences as a career, but instead has abandoned that route to pursue art, I definitely struggle. I try to remind myself of this philosophy and use it to guide me. It brings me intense joy to learn the meaning behind something that the world reduces to a distraction, and to believe that the essence of it being a distraction is the point. It's not a bad thing. Whenever the struggle gets too hard, the lack of jobs, the rising cost of living, constant financial stress, and all things I could have avoided if I pursued the path laid out for me by my parents, I remind myself of Camus. Albert Camus has a famous quote which has become almost a mantra for me. one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Now, what does that mean? In case you don't know the story of Sisyphus, this is a myth that basically he was a Greek king who constantly outwitted the gods in order to achieve his own ends. And in punishment of his greed and cunning, he would have to push a boulder up a hill every day, and just as he almost reached the tippy top, it would roll back down, leaving him trapped in the cycle of endlessly pushing the boulder up the mountain. Often, this is used as a metaphor for the modern struggle to survive, working paycheck to paycheck, just making ends meet and stuck in that endless cycle. However, Camus saw a very different picture. In his view, Sisyphus was a hero, in his perseverance to continue trying and take pride in what he can do, the joy of the struggle, the journey, over the end goal. The world is crazy. There's no way to decide what the end goal is because everything is chaos and a million paths can lead to a million ends. The victory is in choosing one you enjoy and taking pride in it, so that no matter how hard it is or how much you fail along the way, it's about each step of the journey. And I know this is beginning to sound a bit like philosophy gibberish, and honestly it might be, but I guess I'd like to try and explain how I interpret this for myself and how it helps me. Not only is it about Sisyphus taking pride in the work it takes to labor over the rock, it's about each day trying to find a better path to the top of the mountain, of finishing the uphill journey at a point where the path the rock takes on its tumble down will polish it, make it smoother, place it in a better spot for tomorrow's starting point. There are a million ways you can look at what the point of each uphill climb will be, and each day that you labor is your journey, to take pride in what that gives you. People have this idea that what you do has to have a purpose, but we live in a chaotic universe that is eternally expanding towards its eventual demise. What possible assigned purpose could there be? To me at least, the only purpose is to find the meaning and pride in your choices and be content with the consequences. This is certainly not an easy task, and I know I did go a bit off topic, but I feel it applies for everything. Especially if you're a person with interest in arts, it's important to learn your own personal why. For some reason, jeans bring these thoughts up for me, but long story short, philosophy is a fun way to placate yourself. To close things off on a lighter note, I have some trivia. Have you ever wondered why that little useless pocket on jeans exists? Maybe for some change, some candies, to put your earrings in when they're starting to hurt your earlobes? Nope. I'll pause for a second, make your guesses. Yes, indeed, this tiny pocket on our jeans is the remnant of a now practically extinct accessory, the pocket watch. The now industry standard 5-pocket jeans hold on to this pocket because, well, they just wouldn't be jeans without it. Thank you so much for joining me on Read the Care Tag. Follow the Instagram at Read the Care Tag for photos of some of the stuff I talked about today, and please follow the show and review it to let me know what you think of my rambling. Sources are linked in the description, and I hope you have a lovely week. I will be posting bi-weekly, so every other week on Mondays or Tuesdays. Hopefully, I will be increasing that to weekly soon enough, but while I get into the swing of things, and I do have a full-time job, bear with me. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and as always, don't forget to read the Care Tag.